everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source Podcast. This is another Kickstarter Spotlight. Real treat for you today. We're going to be talking about a Kickstarter who's already finished its campaign, but it well exceeded its campaign initial goal. And we even had Jim Starlin on the legendary Jim Starlin on to talk about it while the campaign was going on. But now it's all completed. It's about to start going out to the backers. There's even going to be some copies available in comic stores. So we wanted to have Jim back on to talk about that. And he's being joined by Jaime Jameson, who also contributed to the project as well. And she's going to have some insight. So first of all, thank you two so much for joining me. It's great to see you.
It's a pleasure to be here. And the book actually exists. You know, it's no longer just a JPEG. So we can actually show it off here now.
Yeah, I can't wait to have it on my shelf. So, and it's always a pleasure to talk to Jim. I think I've told you this, Jim. You were my bucket list guy to get on my podcast for the longest time, and we finally made that happen at San Diego 2018, and it was just a pleasure. So it's always great to have you on the show. But this is the first time for you, Jaime. So for people who may not be familiar with you and your work, do you want to give a quick intro about what it is you've done, past work, and what you contributed to the Dreadstar Returns?
Well, I started out with American Gods. I actually did photography and modeled for the female characters with Scott Hampton and PK Gressel. And so started in with more like the layouts and the design such. And then worked with a couple other artists, including Keith Giffen. And I got coached by Jim here. So I've done a few things, but this was the first major project.
Awesome. And how did you find it? Was it great to learn from a legend and kind of pick his brain and,
she
collaborate?
didn't learn much from me. She was on the other side of the country. We ought to give a little bit of history on this. She's actually quite responsible for this book happening, period. About 4 years ago, I blew a big hole in my hand with a compressed air accident, and I just quit drawing. I couldn't draw. I had 5 minutes with a pencil in my hand, and it was cramping up, and I'd have to go soak it in ice. So, but all that time I was doing these ball exercises, squeezing the ball and doing everything I could to improve it. And later on, I was working on the digital files for the Dreadstar Omnibus. And I worked with a stylist, so I was working a little bit, but I didn't think my hand was getting any better. And Jaime came along and started bugging me, not for a Thanos sketch, but for a Dr. Doom sketch. I mean, how inappropriate can you get? So I eventually, after one of these conventions where she had been hounding me unmercifully, I sat down and did this Dr. Doom sketch, and to my surprise, my hand didn't cramp up. I'd been doing enough stuff over the 3-year period that it was actually working again. And so gave her the sketch and decided I was going to try and do some other drawings. And I did some convention drawings, and she was happening to be showing up at the conventions with Keith Giffen. She had been his inker. And I said, how would you like, Keith didn't show up for the show.
Keith couldn't make it to the show. So I was like.
Gave her the sketches to ink. I was very impressed by them. We later did some posters together and a Middleman cover. And so when it was time to do Dreadstar, I finally decided to do Dreadstar Returns. I approached her and said, how would you like to do 100 pages? And asked her if she stop gasping and carrying on. I got an answer. and then the tears and wailing began because confidence wasn't her big suit at the beginning here. But she kept working at it, and I've been pleased right from the beginning and impressed because 20 pages into the job, she got her first case of COVID-19 and got a second one down the line.
Yeah.
We nearly lost her a couple of times, but she's hung in there and has been a major contributing force to this book from the start.
Jim will kill me if I don't finish this book. Even if I'm already dead.
If you die, I'm never going to talk to you again.
Well, I think the first time we had Jim on to talk about the project, you were at that time sick, and Jim mentioned that he was getting a little bit ahead on pencils because you weren't able to work. So glad to hear you're doing better.
Falling down on the job.
Yeah, completely terrible. I do find it interesting. You know, you did mention there, Jim. You know, first of all, and we talked about this the last time you were on, how pleased your fans are that you're back at the drawing table. You know, we're getting Jim Starlin art again. But you did mention that you've started working, you know, digitally now as opposed to, you know, just paper and pencil like, you know, back in the day. Have you found that? How have you found that transition when you started to switch over to digital? And is it just for kind of ease of making corrections and just in terms of efficiency?
Not digital.
No, I'm not completely digital. I still pencil on an analog basis, and she inks it on the board.
Gotcha.
Then we scan, and then the digital part comes in. I enjoy the latter part because it's the coloring, and at the end of the day, I'm not covered with multiple pigments. I can go downstairs and have dinner and not have to scrape for a week before I can be socially acceptable again. You know, it's a different world now. I mean, the lettering is no longer done on the pages like it used to be. Mm-hmm. But we start off very old-fashioned. You know,
it's literally on the board, on the paper, and then inks go down.
Fantastic. So that means for all the original art collectors out there, there are original pages, which is always a great thing to hear.
But yeah, that was the thing. It's like how, I mean, I understand why people, it's so much faster to do probably digital and everything, but then you don't have the original art. So
yeah, as an original art lover, I always limit, like I will never begrudge somebody for doing something that's quicker and allows them to spend more time with their family instead of drawing, you know, 14 hours a day, especially when you have to make changes. But let me ask you this, Jaime. It sounds like you two really got into a groove on the project. Did you feel right away that your inking style could bring a lot to Jim's pencils? Was there any kind of transitional period when you were sort of getting used to his line work, or did you feel like you kind of clicked right away?
Well, I mean, it's all a learning process as I go. I've not, you know, I didn't go to the keyboard school. I'm not, I haven't been inking my whole life or anything like that. I have a lot of friends that are just super talented, and when I have questions, I have people I can go to. Joel Adams has been like my biggest cheerleader. I couldn't ask for anybody to be in my corner more. To, you know, when I have those moments, because I'm in California, I'd go over to Neil's store and I'd work there because it was a place I could go and work, especially after being sick for so long. The last place I wanted to be was in my house anymore. Right. So it was like a safe space to be where I could work and use the copier, make some blue lines and practice if I didn't know how to handle something. So I wouldn't say like I'm going to be great. I think there was more like what he was saying, like the confidence was like this.
Yeah, she would call up and go, I just can't do this. I suck. I'm never going to be able to pull this off. And I'd go, I understand completely. Will you be able to still get me a page tomorrow so I can color it? And I'm sending you 10 more pages. I just completely ignored her, and she carried on, and it worked out just fine. Yeah.
It'd be like, I'm bored of penciling. I need to color. I need another page.
Yes, please. You know, have your breakdown later. Can you please just be productive?
So was that, Jim, was that basically a function of you being in the industry for so long, and even if Jaime maybe didn't believe it, you believed in the talent, like you knew that she could do it?
Well, she was doing the job. I mean, it was obvious that she was doing the job. It was just ego in that, or lack thereof ego.
Right.
Also, the being sick part.
Yeah.
I'm a long hauler. Like, it's, you know, you've heard about the long haulers.
Oh, yeah.
That long hauler stuff is no fun. So if you had a bad day, you have really bad days. So, like, and it got to the point where eventually it was like, I start laughing at myself. I remember one day I put down the worst line I've ever put down and started laughing so hard I started crying. And everybody around just sort of were like, what's so funny? And I was like, look at that line I just put down. And I start crying. Joel starts crying. Everybody's like crying. So I'm laughing at myself at this point. And it was just like, okay, it's okay to just like make a mistake here or there. But like, course, you don't want to say that in front of the penciler, but white paint.
Well, now that it's all done and it looks beautiful, then, you know, happy mistakes. One of the things that you mentioned last time we had you on, Jim, was you were talking about getting ahead on the pencils, and you didn't have everything scripted. You had a little bit of leeway, and you talked about the fact that you always like to leave yourself room to be spontaneous, and you thought you might even have room in this project to go back in and maybe change some single pages to double page spreads, maybe expand a little bit and kind of show off some of those awesome Jim Starlin kind of, you know, collages and montages and whatnot. Did you end up with the space for that? Did you get to really kind of expand?
Yes, there was a lot of improvisation as we went along. We're quite a ways into the next book, actually. Another graphic novel, this one called Dreadstar versus the Inevitable. I'm like 60 pages, some odd pages into it. And she's still in the early teens in the inking, but I've already, in this one, decided I needed 2 more pages at the beginning that I didn't have. So I'm going to have to go through the files and move everything up 2 pages. No, I love this fact that of late working for Marvel or DC, they want a hammered out plot synopsis, and if you vary from it in the least, they freak out. I always liked working where I could, when I was doing Captain Marvel, I would go in and talk to Roy Thomas, and I'd say, well, this issue, Captain Marvel versus the Super Skrull, and go for it. Because he just had too much stuff that he didn't have time to put up with a lengthy discussion. And he trusted me to go off and do a good story. And so I always had the ability for a long time to just throw things in. There's a character in Captain Marvel called Ian. He's sort of a floating head with a face on one side, a big eye on the other, and the rest of it's dirt. Looks like a piece of dung hanging in space with hair on top. And he came out of me walking home from a party one night and seeing a grease stain on a garbage bag. And I saw that, and I saw the character fully rendered at that point, went home and added him immediately to the Captain Marvel Metamorphosis story. Working with the 100 pages and not having to answer to anybody, I'm able to do much of the same thing. I can change at the last moment, and if I want to throw out a page or so, who's going to stop me? You know, I'm doing 1 book a year, but that's the plan, and I want it to be the best book that it can be. And if you know, we're going to do some spontaneous retrofitting on things as we go along, you know, we'll do it. Jamie's seen this in the works, and she doesn't freak out too badly about it. Not at all, actually.
Oh, yeah.
She just, okay, it's going to work sooner or later, you know. I mean, and, you know, I think it worked out fairly well with Dreadstar Returns. We had a lot of things we had to work with, such as 25 years between issues, and I didn't want to have a lot of exposition as to who the character was. So a lot of it was worked so anyone could come in and start on Dreadstar Returns and not feel that they were missing out on a lot of history, even though we were letting them know that there was a lot of history to miss out on. You could go on, and I think we've been able to successfully have a first-time reader come in and enjoy Dreadstar Returns as much as someone who's been with it from the beginning.
And do you want to, for fans of Dreadstar, you know, for its whole run and for new people that may be coming on, do you want to quickly give a kind of a recap of what this story is that's bringing Vanth back to the comic page?
Okay, well, Vanth has always been a anarchist without a second act. He's good at breaking things and never been very good at living in a society that's functioning. He's learned how to do that, basically. He's learned how to put his more destructive urges to a constructive use. And he's fit into this society of the Willow Consortium in his own unique way. He's still very much the outsider. And when this peril to the very heart of the Willow Consortium in home planet of Alterix arises, he's pulled back to it and has to use his powers and his friends, which include Eddie the Catman and Willow, who is at the beginning of the story part of the digital platform that runs the whole empire. They all have to work together with a few other characters to solve the mystery of what is threatening their universe and how to deal with it, because it's all a big mystery to begin with. And as it goes along, you find out it's an unrequited love story. And there's very little more I can tell than that without ruining for you.
Oh yeah, we definitely don't want to do spoilers. I mean, I got my digital copies. Obviously, I backed the Kickstarter, and I look forward to getting. And I got the guidebook as well. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I can't wait to get my hands on the physical copy and sit down and enjoy it. But what's interesting to me is, as you mentioned, at the end of the graphic novel, we're teased for the next one, and you mentioned it already. Now, last time you were on, you talked about going back to Dreadstar, and you had an idea for the last Dreadstar story. But then you stuck it in a drawer because, in your words, you said, well, we may be having, TV or movie stuff coming down the pipe. Maybe not the best time to tell the last Dreadstar story. So you decided to tell this one first. You didn't at the time mention that maybe you had some other ideas.
Didn't have those stories in mind at the time.
That's what I was going to ask. Has working on this one spurred more ideas of more Dreadstar tales?
Yes, I mean, life itself is a generator of ideas. This is very much our pandemic book. We did it throughout the quarantine. Half the team suffered mightily from the malady. The next book is past the quarantine. We have an outside life again, but it's going to be very much about the pandemic. Dreadstar versus the Inevitable is going to be about accepting the fact that you cannot control everything in life, and some of it is going to either run you over and destroy you, or you learn how to go with the flow and survive. And basically, the inevitable, the nameless, is it's basically the pandemic in a physical form coming at an entire universe on a cosmic level. So it's going to be a kick-ass story. I'm having a lot of fun with it already.
That's awesome. There is a certain feel to a Jim Starlin story, Jaime. So I know you're probably very aware of that. Is there anything that you do differently when you're working on Jim's line work as opposed to somebody else that kind of captures that feel, or is it more just you kind of go with the flow of the page? Is there anything you do differently with Jim's line work?
I mean, I kind of just go with the flow. There's always something, some new element or something that's going on in the pages where you just kind of go with it, especially because he does use all these cosmic backgrounds on certain things, and the lighting is going to be a little different than, say, in a ship than just, everyday life. So, I mean, you just kind of go with what's given on the page and go from there.
So it's almost just like the style of that feel that I'm talking about of Jim Starlin, but it's just there in the pages already, and you just have to.
Oh, I try to stick to definitely try to stick to the old Jim Starlin, the back in the day stuff, of course, but there's also, I'm not Jim, so right. I'm not going to be exactly the same. So
she brings her own style to it, and she didn't realize it at the beginning, but part of the job of an inker is adding to the pencils.
Right.
Just doing exactly what's down there that's not contributing to anything.
Right.
And so she was sneaking in corrections. to if the face wasn't quite right, she'd fix it and hope I wouldn't notice. And of course I noticed, and I was going, this is great. And eventually she got to realize that this is actually a collaboration, not an enslavement. And it's expanded out. We have much more than just a pencil or inker relationship. I bounce ideas off her all the time. And she's very upfront about in her criticism of things. I mean, it's very constructive criticism. She didn't like Willow. You know, she didn't like the way Willow looked. And
maybe back then when Willow was around back then, but I was like, this is not sexy now. This is not. I'm sorry, like she's got to change with the times. What's up with that hair? And he was like, Gibson girl. I was like Debbie Gibson? I had no idea what he was talking about.
So I started getting deluged with all these JPEGs, hairstyles, and warm-up suits and boots. I got a million damn boots. And we worked things out, and she helped me design that. And once, speaking of Willow and the human anatomy, you know, everybody's got their strong suit, and my female figures are not the strongest in the world sometimes. I have to work on them, I admit it. I mean, a lot of folks like Steve Ditko and, you know, Kirby and that, you know, they haven't done the most exotic female forms. But she's my regulator. I've decided to start calling her the Brazar because, well, you can tell her you're a part of it here.
Well, Willow's breasts kept changing sizes. There'd be balloons in one panel, and then she'd be a B cup. And I'm like, dude, just give her one size and stick to it. And I was like, I guess because you don't have your own. I mean, if mine just kept changing size, I wouldn't have a bra to wear.
Right. Yep.
It became an ongoing joke. So,
so she's the breast regulator at this point.
Fantastic. That's such a great story. And I'm glad to hear that.
That's one that we can tell kids, but you know,
right.
For adults things.
Exactly. Well, that's great. I mean, to your point, Jim, that's exactly what an inker is supposed to do, right? Like make those corrections, bring in textures, be additive, and to your point earlier about her actually, you know, adding to the story and being there as somebody that you can bounce ideas off of. That's fantastic. It's only there to help the story, right? It's all in service to telling the best story that you can.
And it makes it more funny working too. I mean, you got to have fun working. If not, it's work.
Right.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. As readers, as fans, we can always tell when a creative team is passionate about something, number one, and if they're having fun, that comes out in the story and makes it a lot better as well.
Yeah. We've had a lot of fun with this one.
Yeah.
Minus COVID.
Despite you're almost done.
Yeah.
Right.
Despite the almost
Other
dying.
than that,
other than that, this is Lincoln. How was the show?
Well, I mentioned the guidebook earlier. That's something else that was part of the campaign, and I think it's a great resource, especially for those who may not be as familiar with Dreadstar. And I know that you weren't necessarily as involved with getting all those things together, Jim, but now that the guidebook is finished as well, once you saw the kind of the final product, were you real pleased with how it turned out?
Yes, I wasn't very enthusiastic about the whole idea to begin with because, you know, I always thought it was something that you did for like Marvel or DC that had 20, 30, 50 years of continuity. But then I suddenly realized, well, I do have 25 years of continuity here. And Bob Greenberger, who is one of the comic book historians, him and Jim Salicrop. But Bob took this project on, and he has done a bang-up job. Phil Smith, who is the visual and tech person up at Ominous, did a great job in the design. Everybody involved with it, Bart Sears, who was also the art director up there, got his hand in on it. And my part was basically looking it over and saying, yeah, this is terrific. And they've done a really good job. We haven't got our copies of it yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen the guidebook in hand.
Yeah,
but
JPEGs at this point so far. So I'm looking forward to that one also.
Yeah, me too. Now, we did mention that the Kickstarter has been completed, but if you go to the Kickstarter page, there's still a way to buy the book. And then I was also informed that it's going to be in comic stores. So are you guys directly distributing? Can you give us any info on how that's going to work?
Not really at this point. It's not finalized. I don't know exactly what's happening. I know it's going to be getting into the comic book shops. When and where and how is still not set. But in the meantime, both books are available by just going to ominous.com.
No, ominouspress.com.
Ominousspress.com. That's why I keep her around. She always corrected me. Yeah, but you can get it there, and we should. Anything more I should be adding on that? I mean,
no, or keeping everybody over at Ominous busy. I know Ron Mars has been busy.
Yeah, so you can get it that way, but it will eventually be in the comic book shops too.
I think it ships out to the Kickstarter folks on June 1st, is what we learned today.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we're supposed to be getting it overnight tomorrow on the signing plates that we're supposed to get. So they're not out to the everybody. People just bought the regular books. They're getting them already, I think. But the ones who got the special things like the signed plate and stuff like that,
Yeah,
we haven't signed them yet. You haven't got them yet,
Yeah.
in case you hadn't noticed, and they will be coming now.
Yeah, but I think everybody's digital probably, because I got my digital earlier this week, the digital element. Yeah. So everybody, I'll put a link. I'm going to put a link both to the campaign page so you can go and look, because there's a lot of information there. And like I said, there is a link there, and it probably goes to the Ominous Press site where you can still order it even if you didn't get to participate in the campaign. So, but I'll also put a link to the ominousspress.com site as well, just to be sure. So it should be covered there. And then when I do get more info about when it might be in comic shops, I'm sure we'll be mentioning it. When it hits and on our new comic book episodes and whatnot. So all of that will be forthcoming. You mentioned, Jim, being 60 pages into this, the next one, and planning on doing one a year. How far? It sounds like you're a little further along with this one as opposed with the next one rather, as opposed to when you started the campaign for the Dreadstar Returns. Is that accurate?
There was a pandemic. So
yeah, there was.
Yeah,
the pandemic has made me very productive. The quarantine rather has made me very productive. I'm trying to remember what I had done. I think I had at least 30 pages of pencils when we did the Kickstarter. I know I just kept working at it. I knew I was going to do this. So whatever the Kickstarter, we were hoping that the Kickstarter would make up enough money just to get us the print costs. We were trying for, I think it was $18,000, and
yeah,
we went over 100. So
also you've been drawing. Now you're drawing so regularly that your hand is probably getting back into it.
Yeah, I've slowed things up. I've just relocated from New York to, I'm out here in LA right at the moment. And, so that's slowed things up a bit, but I'm still 60 pages into it already, and I'm producing here, so it's going to continue on.
Fantastic. The only reason I ask is just because, not to put too much pressure on you, but the faster that we can get these, the better in terms of for the fans, right? Like
I don't think that's pressure on him. I think that's more pressure on me. Thanks.
Wow, faster. Let's get those inks out.
Next, I need to color.
Yes.
Well, to Jamie's point, now that you've been back at the drawing table for an extended period of time, have you noticed that you've been getting a little faster?
Yeah, and I've learned some tricks that have helped. There are certain things as far as reference that you didn't have in the old days. If I need anything in particular, I just Google an image of it, and I have the reference for it. I'm actually working with a program called Poser or DAZ 3D, and that's a big help for.
Was certain somebody told you.
Yes, somebody told me about it. She wants credit. She gets it, and that's helped. Facilitate and make it a lot quicker. I mean, if I can just throw this figure, I'm not going to get a finished drawing out of it. I'm going to get a figure that was in the position that I want in general, and I'll sit down there and pencil it and make the changes and put on the features and stuff like that. But it saves me a lot of time from having to go through all the construction of the figure and that. So it's a time saver, and so things do go a little bit quicker than they did in the old days. Yes.
Yeah,
Hopefully I'm a little bit smarter. Doubtful, right? Yeah, okay.
It's
my support team here.
Yeah. I mean, it is so interesting that the digital tools now, like you said, you can Google reference of a car, a pig, a toaster, a building, whatever. It's all out there now. It's just to the benefit of the artist, which I find to be interesting. But the other part about this, and you've been doing this for so long, and your line work has always been, beautiful. So I think I had told you this before. You were one of the first artists whose art I could recognize. Like, I'm like, oh, that's Jim Starlin. I'm buying that. I've heard so many artists say, but you do never want to stop learning and evolving and make sure that you continue to improve. You've been doing this so long. Do you still find that to be true?
Okay, Jaime can attest to this. The other day when we got the books in, about 2 or 3 days later, I finally sit down and look at it, and all I can see is the things I hate.
Just great. He's like, I could have changed this. I could have changed that. And I was like, this is why
this could have been done better.
My thing is, if you feel like you're a master and you love your, like I'm constantly learning. If I'm not learning them, I'm dead, because like there's always more to learn. But yeah, like I try not to judge the past stuff or look back at stuff, or like I do music as well, so like criticize music and I could have done this differently, or why didn't I do. You're always going to want to change it. You're never going to be fully happy with yourself unless you're a complete narcissist. So
yeah, every artist is worth his what goes through that when the job finally comes out, and we all know it. We all know that you'll get past it, but during that day that you're doing it, you're going, oh shit, I should have stayed on the assembly line in Detroit. I would have had a better life that way.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think a lot of people would be really upset if you did that.
Well, never
worldwide. But yes, I do hear that from a lot of artists. At some point, you've got to stop noodling. There are deadlines. You've got to be just not necessarily 100% satisfied, but just willing to let go of a particular piece and move on. But again, like I totally agree with what you said, Jaime. Once you stop learning and stop moving and you're stagnated, you're not living anymore.
Right. And that's exactly it. Like, I mean, I can't sit here, like I said, I didn't go to the Kubert school. I don't know everything there is to know about inking. I'm lucky I've got friends like Scott Hanna, who I do like a weekly, we chat for like 2 hours a week sometimes, and I'll just go over stuff that I'm like, technical questions, or, like, it's good to ask questions, and especially when it's a more intellectual side of things. Like, I understand what it's supposed to look like, but why? Once you understand the whys, and ding, 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 like it helps to understand those types of things. So learning.
The other aspect of this this kind of evolution that I wanted to ask you about, Jim, is also in terms of the story, right? I feel like you've always been ahead of your time in wanting to really get into the motivation of characters. We talked about that last time, and really taking almost a philosophical kind of angle at these characters, and bringing in some of the questions about what it means to be human and to be in the relationship and to care. And certainly since the start of your career to where we are now, the world has changed quite a bit in terms of equality and things like that. And there's still so many battles and still so far to go. But to me, you've always been so aware of that. Do you feel like that still really informs your work and kind of spurs you on to want to tell these stories and bring in these aspects of what it means to be a living, breathing being?
I don't know anybody who's perfect. And perfect characters inside literature are boring characters. I love the flaws. The flaws are what gives it texture. Dreadstar and his magic sword is pretty cool on the emotion on the surface level, but he's really interesting because he's a massive contradictions. He starts off in his story wiping out all the polar bears of this planet because they killed his parents. Then he becomes a farmer, and when that doesn't work out, he becomes this butcher of kings. the fact that he's so inconsistent has always been his consistent element, and that's what makes him interesting. Syzygy Darklock sacrifices the woman of his dreams in order to attain a goal that not everyone would say is honorable. I find these people are the most interesting, and I would want to read about them more than I want to read about the guy who's going to do the right thing every time. And your best characters have been the ones that are ripe with contradictions. Batman is a psycho who's doing good. Spider-Man is a guilt-ridden teenager who's never going to get over to screwing up with his uncle. These are all flaws that make these characters lovable to us. So that's where I'm sort of out on that one. Give me the pimples.
Well, to your point, Superman is kind of hard to relate to, like I don't have that massive ability that he does. And I struggle, I'm not going to choose the right thing every time, it's hard. It's, for us as humans, to your point, it's impossible for us to make the right choice every time.
And it makes it hard to write a character like that. Superman is very difficult to write and make it good.
I would say as a writer, it's probably hard to find a touch point to get into understanding the character. And as readers, again, it's hard to relate. So, yeah.
The more complex a character is, he is easier to write. I worked over at Marvel on the Punisher, and they said there's 2 rules. If he's on a page with a character, within a few pages, that character has to die horribly. Second rule, if he's has an object in the panel with him, somewhere along the line in the next few pages, it's got to be blown up. And that's the only direction they gave me on this character. I went, how boring is that? And so I immediately went off and made him a psycho instead. More of a psycho, a more complex psycho.
Yeah, I agree. Any hard and fast rules, you're removing the spontaneity that you talked about, that you love so much about telling stories.
Yeah.
So that's
Look at Thanos. He's pretty complex.
Oh my God, Thanos. Yeah, Thanos is maybe one of the most complex characters ever created in comics, and it's what makes him so interesting.
Yeah, I can overdo it. Yeah.
See, I actually agree with a lot of Thanos's ideas in certain ways. So he thinks I'm really sick in the fact that
she scares me sometimes. She really scares me sometimes.
Well, no, I hear Jamie say that, and I'm just thinking, well, I'm glad the Infinity Gems aren't real then. If she got her hands on those, we'd all be in trouble.
Actually, I do have a set. I just haven't installed them on the Gauntlet yet.
That's fantastic. Well, one last thing I want to touch on, getting back to the graphic novel Dreadstar Returns. You did kind of briefly mention it, Jim, that you're doing the color work as well over Jaime's inks. I think I've heard you say before that you enjoy doing the color work because it's so kind of relaxing, and it's sort of that final touch on the book to sort of set the mood. So, the fact that you were getting to do that over your own pencils for this project, can you talk a little bit about that? Did it feel like coming home? Was it really enjoyable as it had been in the past?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when I was at Marvel and DC, there were production schedules and that, and I couldn't do that. I would do backgrounds, digital backgrounds that other colorists would finish off on the Thanos books and what have you. But this, I've had the time to sit down from start to finish, and because of that, a lot of times I design the page up with the idea that it may be kind of skimpy on the pencils because I know that a lot of what I want is going to be better served doing it digitally. Mm-hmm. And so and it is, color is so intricate. Your inks have a tremendous amount to do with how the book will look in that. the color has a lot to do with how the book will feel.
Right.
And so it's something I just love doing. Like you said, it's the final stage. There's no lettering on it at that point, and so I have to sort of visualize that as I'm doing it. But that's basically figuring out where the white holes in your painting is going to be. And no, but it is probably my favorite part of the job, the most relaxing.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, I want to thank you two for your time. It's been amazing. I can't wait to get the hard copies in my hand of these books. I'm very happy, Jim, that in doing this, you've been inspired and discovered you have more stories to tell with Vanth. And so we look forward to future campaigns. As we're winding up here, Jim, is there anything else that you want our listeners and your fans to know?
No, I think you pretty well covered everything.
You can thank them for buying the book.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you for buying the book. Thank you for keeping me alive over the last X number of decades. So, we will see you out there on the convention circuit soon. We are coming back to normal. We have gotten through this together, and we will get through what is coming together, folks. So let's get back to getting back to smiling and seeing what the bottom part of our faces look like again.
Yeah, 100%. Now I know Jim's not very active on social media, but what about you, Jaime? Is there anywhere online that people should follow you if they want to get news about your work that you're doing with Jim?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. It's James Jameson. It's actually James, male name. I'm on Facebook, and I'm also on Twitter. I have not been very active on my social media since all this started, as being sick for so long, and we're just now starting to open up in California. So I didn't think people wanted to see pictures of my animals all the time or the inside of my house. So there wasn't a lot to post, but now I'll be more active. So
great. And everybody, I'll put links to Jamie's social media, her Instagram and Twitter in the show notes as well, so you can go click there and give her a follow. And remember, even though the campaign is over, ominouspress.com, where you can still get these books. I will let everybody know when they're in comic shops. And certainly, Jim, Jaime, when the campaign comes down comes down the line for the next book, the next tale of Dreadstar, we're always happy to have you back on to chat about it. So
awesome. We look forward to it.
We'll be there.
Thanks for having us.
All right. And to you listeners and viewers, we appreciate your support as always and for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.